Okay, call our meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda, item C, priority school allocation, Appendix F, Dale Pelcy back.
I don't think your microphone's working. Now it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, I am so happy to be in front of you to share some information real quickly about our priority school allocation. We are charged with, from the state, to provide supplemental funding to our most needy schools. And when the legislator required that the DSSF funds, which is the Disadvantaged Student Supplemental Funds, were to be used, we were also asked to use any other type of supplemental funding, like at-risk, or if we had any type of alternative schools and for improvement in our accountability. So each year during the budget process, I meet with Ms. Mary Hazel Small, and this past year, we included Dr. LaShawn Smith to talk about what are our priority needs in our schools. So a little history, going back in the fall of 2006, New Hanover County Schools was deemed a LEA improvement due to our proficiency at all 3 grade spans. So therefore, they allowed us to use our Title I funds that we had, that Ms. Jackson monitors at the central office. Beyond what the schools received from their needs, she also has to do some set-asides to use that funding for all schools, not just Title I schools, but all schools. So therefore, the plan started out with using those fundings. And when we first went to middle school with our Title I funds, the high schools who could have received, especially New Hanover High School, we took the DSSF money, and provided it to all of our high schools, which they use for Saturday.
Make sure I understand something. You said that the Title I funds were using in all of the schools, not just Title I.
When we went into LEA improvement, there was set-aside Title I money that we could use for all schools. So we took the needs based on looking at our test scores and other factors, and we used those funding. What we did with that money was to buy some software, because there were constraints of what we could use it for. We did staff development. We paid incentives to teachers at some schools. So that's how the funding was used in 2006. As we continued on, the school system came out of LEA improvement in 2010-11. That's when it went back to just Title I schools where we could use this supplemental funding. And what we did was we looked at the data, of course, and we looked at what are the neediest schools. And at that time, the board also instructed that we make sure that the neediest school got additional funding to make sure that they were getting all the support that they needed. So we moved forward with that. In 2010, the state identified, even though the district came out of improvement, the state identified some schools that were still needing to show proficiency and progress. And we had, at that time, 5 elementary schools and 1 high school. And then the local decision of schools that still were needy that the state didn't identify, we had 7 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. And that priority 1 went to our lowest performing, and it wasn't just lowest performing for New Hanover County, but it was lowest performing across the state. That was, at that time, it was Snipes and it was Sunset Park. We also had 3 schools that were considered priority schools. Now, the 1 high school was New Hanover High School during that time, and it was deemed as the persistently lowest achieving high school, which meant each year they were doing the dip, up and down, up and down. So the state identified New Hanover High School during that time. And then we had 3 other elementary schools, which was Freeman, Alderman, and Forest Hills, that were considered high priority from the state. So those were the levels 1, 2, and 3. What we did locally is that some of the schools, the principal spoke with the superintendent, spoke with central office and said, we still have needs. And one of the things that we would like is to employ more teachers, to make our class sizes smaller, to help us with that. So we came up with a plan that we also gave money to schools that weren't on the list from the state. You can go to the next one. This past year, what we did is we had 4 levels of priority. Sunset Park came off of the state's priority list because of the progress they made. They went from being a #1 priority of a low-performing school to now we've moved them down to priority 4 for additional resources, because the principal said to us, yes, we've made progress, we're doing really great, but you can't pull the rug out from under us. We still need some support. The #1 priority school is Snipes. It is still a school that is struggling with proficiency, and the state has deemed them a priority 1 school. Our priority 2 are our focus schools. Our focus schools are Forest Hills, Alderman, and Williston. Those are the 3 that the state has identified as focus schools.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What is the difference between Snipes and Sunset Park? And what has been done at one school that is not being done at the other that would cause such a disparity in the results?
Leadership, bottom line.
It can all be down to just leadership? That's it?
You put a rookie principal in the school that has some of the highest free and reduced lunch numbers in the district and asked her to turn it around. That's an impossible task for nearly a veteran principal. You've got LaShawn Smith sitting over there at Sunset, who was a veteran principal at Murray, and who went to Sunset Park, trained her assistant principal once the school was in place to take over. So if you ask me for the single biggest reason why Snipes has not been able to pull itself out, it's leadership.
And so do you expect that to change?
Well, Cindy Talbert is a veteran principal, has had a history of turning around schools. We've got a new assessment that went in place this year. She's not going to lead the district in terms of numbers, but next year, after she's had her second year in there and has put some of her own folks in place and has had a chance to work with the community, I anticipate that they'll have tremendous growth.
There's been a lot of turnover of teachers and staff at Snipes.
Snipes has a high history of turnover. Demographically, it's a tough school. As we said, it's almost 100% free and reduced lunch. You've got, not only that, you've got neighborhood turnover. If you walk within several blocks of Snipes, there are no kids within 3 or 4 blocks of school actually attend the school. And it's mostly because it's in a beautiful neighborhood, but it's older families. It's not a case of where they're not sending their kids to Snipes, but it's just simply they haven't started to turn those over into to kids again. Sunset Park, nobody leaves Sunset Park. And we're talking about a school with some challenging demographics as well, but the culture at the school that was put in place by the principal over the last several principals has created a place where they know it's tough, but they're willing to do that work. And Cindy's working on building that culture at Snipes.
And you mentioned incentive funding to teachers. Now, the teachers at Snipes would certainly qualify for that kind of
Yes. Yes. Several of our lowest performing schools, we want the very best teachers there. And so we gave an incentive, and part of the DSSF as well as Race to the Top, all of those funding says that we can use that money for incentives and bonuses.
So do they have to agree to stay for a certain amount of time to receive that funding, or do they just receive it for 1 year with no obligation?
Well, of course, we want them to stay, because that was stability was one of the issues at Sunset Park as well as at Snipes. And so that is something that the teachers agreed to stay there in order to receive the bonus, yes. And I worked with Human Resources. Dr. Hahn did a plan on that incentive so that we were looking at not just proficiency, but some other factors in the school. We looked at teacher attendance as well as student attendance. So there were a lot of things that went into how are we going to make sure that we are getting the bang for the buck, per se.
With your priority schools, you've got to reach a balance. They need more resources than non-priority schools. But you have to have somebody who understands where to allocate those resources and get the use out of those resources. There's got to be a good plan in place for how you use those funds. Because you look at it, New Hanover's off the list, Sunset Park is off the list.
College Park, Murrayville.
Murrayville. I anticipate that Forest Hills and Alderman will both, if they're not off this year, will have shown improvement and most likely will be off the list the year after next. So it's a combination of leadership and resources. Because these are some of our most challenged kids. It's when you think about kindergarten, and we've had this discussion before. If I'm a kid who's coming from a home of 2 college parents walking through the door, my vocabulary is almost twice as much as somebody else who's walking through that door for some of our really high socioeconomic kids. There's a huge gap entering kindergarten, and we've got to use those resources to fix and close that gap by 3rd grade. It's a real short window to take those kids, and that's where preschool and a lot of the resources we're putting into these schools are being focused, and on the literacy piece as well. And if we don't fix it by 3rd grade, then the cost to make it work goes up.
And like Dr. Markley stated, priority 2 used to be New Hanover High School as the persistently lowest achieving school. And now they are down at number 4, where we say we reduce support of 2 schools with improved results. And New Hanover is one of those schools. And of course, like he mentioned, Murrayville, College Park, and even Bradley Creek have come off of our priority list because of the progress that they're made in their schools. Now, of course, we have a priority coach that may be working with some of these schools that are off the list because we feel like they do need additional services. And each year, this budget is built, this priority schools plan is built during the budget process of how are we going to use these dollars efficiently and effectively to get what you expect as far as the growth and progress. And so we're all on that together. We expect growth as well. One of the things that the principal said to us when Ms. Mary Hazel Small and Dr. Smith met, well, if we don't meet our projected outcomes, are you going to take the money away? And we said, it depends. Because if you're saying that these are the list of things that you expect to see by having this additional resource, then we, of course, are wanting to see that that is happening. Now, are we going to judge you by another school? Maybe one school makes a 5-point growth or another school makes a 10-point growth. We'll have to look at that because as you build the budget each year, and I think going into next year with building this budget and looking at this priority funding, you will be expecting to see some growth, and we are expecting to see some growth. And that's why this priority list has shrunk, because we are looking at the neediest, and we are saying to the principals, you can't just say you need it because you've always had it, because what has happened when we were giving out these priority positions, and then the next year we say, well, you know, these are your different categories. They say, wait a minute, you can't take that from us. We've always had that. We had to explain to them, this is additional resources based on the need. And so if you have the need, then there's work that you're going to have to produce to make sure that we are using these funds correctly. So the next slide where it talks about what was the rationale for this allocation, and we met with the principals, and we talked about that this is an outcome-based priority allocation. And I think the board members have said that very loudly and clearly that they want to see outcomes. So the schools develop their plan. They talk about their needs assessment. They tell us what their performance targets are and their benchmarks, and then their request for the funding. Allocations from here forward was going to be based on dollars and not on positions, because like I said, once you have someone there, you assume every year that person is going to be there. We need to let them know you have the flexibility to tell us how you want to use this. If you want to use it for positions, fine. If you want to use it for materials and resources, that's fine as well. Tutors, that's fine. But understand, this is in this separate allocation. This is not your regular allocation. So we talked about the rationale, that there should be an alignment to the allocation of resources and the needs of the school, and that this will help to ensure that it's more efficient and effective utilization of these resources, and that schools that assess current needs and plans more strategically. Of course, we do the school improvement plan. We ask them to put that information down for us to tell us where they are and what their expectations are. We share with them that they need to make sure that they do a regular needs assessment that ensures that their priorities are based on what their practices and processes are going to be. We asked them to give us some performance targets and benchmarks, and then communicating this to the schools in this manner is a clearer way for them to understand what they are getting and how to use this, and also gives them the flexibility. The next slide shows some of our EOC, EOG data, and the schools, like I told you, Snipes is our #1 priority school, which the state has deemed as a school that needs to improve. And Dr. Markley mentioned the change in leadership. There have been change in staff members. Ms. Cindy Talbert this year has worked diligently with her community, trying to build a culture in the school of high expectations. I think her enthusiasm and the things that she is building is we're going to see some results. And as Dr. Markley said, she may not be setting it on fire next year, but if we saw a huge jump, we would kind of question what's going on, because she's working very diligently with the students. Alderman, Forest Hills, and Williston, I told you, were 3 focus schools that were designated by the state, and this is their data. The next slide shows the schools that New Hanover County schools deemed as schools that could receive additional support, and their data. Virgo is on this list. Sunset Park, Virgo, and New Hanover are on this list to receive additional resources, but they don't get to the level that the other schools are receiving. On the next slide, it talks about exactly what are those allocations. So you have their TAs, teacher assistants, their tutors, their teachers, if they have instructional coaches, the coordinator, MTSS coordinator, which is a person that will be working very closely with the exceptional children, their additional assistant principals, their total positions, those who get incentive pay, the priority coach that works with them, works with all of these schools, instructional supplies, staff development, what their proposed priority allotment will be for the next year, and what the percentages that they're receiving. Now, when you look at Snipes and you see the 56%, they have applied for and gotten a school improvement grant from the state. And Ms. Jackson, how much money was that for? 1.8 million over 3 years. So that money there is mostly part of that SIG grant. As you look down at below the planning, the funding that we were looking at, it tells you the federal, the state, a local GE grant funding that we get, and the next, that last section is the amount, Dr. Hickey, that you were asking about. That breaks it out of what those positions are.
What schools are those positions being allocated to?
It's across the whole group, isn't it, Ms. Small?
We just sort of looked at the total funding, and I just split it out because we could have assigned those positions to any of those certain courses, and so I don't think I brought which ones those would actually be. So if you cut 300, we probably cut across the board.
Right.
And reallocate.
Right.
We would not just cut the schools that have to go. We would have to reallocate for all the priority schools.
We would do a reallocation. The schools that you can see are receiving additional funding, and they chose how they were using this. And majority, as we told you at the work session, are positions. That's how they wanted to utilize their funding. And they asked for much more than this. But based on our, the funding that we had, we broke it down into what we were able to give them. And then that extra is that piece down there in the shaded area.
Let me ask you a question, Dale. Under the priority school allotments, 2013-14, in looking at the priority 1, Snipes, the extra allocation, 56%, that's above and beyond what the normal allocation is? Is that the way?
Okay, they get their Title I allocation, so that's not in here. Part of this is their funding from the SIG grant, the School Improvement Grant.
Mm-hmm.
That's the majority of what this money is.
But could Snipes potentially be receiving some of this if we were to approve the additional local fund balance request, would Snipes be one of those schools that may receive some of this funding?
300 did not include Snipes. Most of their extra
From the SIG grant, but they also had some of the Central Title I funding.
Right,
do remember that one, 'cause-
set-aside funding that Title I has for the district, they got some of that, but they didn't get this piece. This piece down here really, I guess in practical terms, rounded up. And so if a school was getting a point something, this extra money helped them get a full person. That's kind of what we were short to give the school a clear.
We sort of had a goal of percentage funding based on every level, excluding Snipes, because Snipes funding was based on the grant. But for the others, we were trying to get a target percentage of extra based on priority 2, 3, and 4. And that was the amount we needed to kind of, like she said, round up that allocation. So, if we didn't have that, we would take the resources we did have for priority purposes and reallocate.
So each year during.
One second.
Okay.
I really don't like the sound of that. I would like to think that we were allocating money based on what we thought we really needed, not on rounding out
No, we
based
did-
on level priorities.
we did
because
that
that's sort of
first.
putting the money before the horse.
Now, the schools turned in the detailed plan she described, which were way in excess of the amount that we recommended. But our recommendations, we wanted the state-focused schools to have more resources, but more of their I guess, requests were recommended based on their level of need.
A school might have identified what they thought were additional needs that might have totaled 15%. Well, we don't have the funds to go to what they wanted for that 15%. So we backed those numbers down and said we can do up to 9% for these most needy schools, 6% for that next category, and that way. So the requests and needs were in excess of the amount that we've given.
And in past years, that was formula-based. We had different formulas, different class sizes for teachers and assistants. And what we were hearing from the priority schools is that they needed more flexibility. They may need staff development or supplies or tutors. And so by doing it this way, we were able to address more of their concerns in terms of flexibility, which was the reason for the change.
Well, to be fair, I mean, when you look at, let's take Snipes, for example, when you look at Snipes' achievement scores,
Yes.
and you can go back 07, 08, consistently below, and on the average between 35 and 40% below the state or the district average in terms of EOG achievements.
Yes.
It's really kind of a tough pill to swallow when you pour so much funding into these schools and you don't get a return on investment. You don't see what you would hope to see in terms of achievement level, which is really the end goal here. And I have a real hard time, $300,000 is a lot of money that could be used in some of these other things that these schools are getting as a result of their priority status. I don't have a question, I just had a statement.
With the exception of Snipes, and let's face it, Snipes is our biggest challenge. And over a number of years, they've had a number of factors that have dealt with that. Talked a little bit about leadership. It has consistently been probably our highest percentage of poverty concentrated in one place, well over 90%. It has a transient rate that's as much as 25% in a year. It's had a high teacher turnover rate year after year. There was a lot of mental health issues. You heard those folks talk about what they have there for mental health issues.
Well,
So,
I think we've kind of proven at this point that all of this money is really not doing much of anything.
now, I would tell you, money without direction does nothing. Kansas City is a prime example of that, where they poured millions and billions into a system, and there was no direction on where those dollars go. When you've got direction and focus on where to put those dollars at those high-need schools, you can see results.
Okay, but you're asking us to rely on the schools who have been underperforming to give us recommendations or to say, this is what we need and this is going to turn things around. How long do we continue to
No, I'm asking
do
that we do this based on the recommendation of a principal we put in there who has a history of turning around schools.
As I stated, there were schools that were high on the list, and Sunset Park is a perfect example. that has dropped off the state list. Murrayville was on the list, College Park was on the list, and those were schools that we were supporting, but with the leadership and focusing on what the needs were for the school and not just 2 or 3 teachers say, we'd like to have this program, and you purchase a program, but it's not affecting the entire school. Those types of needs assessment, is it really working? And remember, we talked about before, the schools, when we did a district needs assessment that had the most programs on top of each other, were the least effective. So looking at that closer and directing them to provide that information is where we are today. I agree with you that we have been trying to give them that opportunity to make those decisions, and sometimes those decisions weren't the best decisions. We are more involved with that now. It's not just a site-based decision because we're basing it on outcomes. And so this plan that we put together and sat down with these principals of these schools saying, this is what we're going to be expecting of you based on what you say your needs are. This is the outcome we should be seeing. And then next year you will be reevaluated to see if that same amount of funding goes to you, especially if you are a local priority school. I'm not talking about the state, because the state does give us some funding to work with those schools. We have additional schools that are in priority 3 and priority 4 that are not state identified. That's what the district has identified based on factors.
I have a question, and this may actually be directed at Dr. Barkley for clarification. I understand snipes. I understand the whole issue with snipes and the fact that there's been a transition, faculty coming, faculty going, and I do believe with Ms. Talbot in there that there's a good opportunity that snipes will improve. My question, though, is this. If we look at what's on the screen right now, Alderman, Forest Hills, and Williston, over the 3 years, 2009 to 2012, as I look across those numbers, they have actually gone down or been flat at best. And they're not snipes. They're not in a situation. I mean, what are we doing at Alderman, Forest Hills, and Williston that will cause those numbers to, if not spike up, at least turn up, so that we're doing better in 2012, 2013 than we did in 2009, 2010?
Well, I will, 12, 13, because it's a new assessment, I really won't be able to tell you what it's going to look like, because the state doesn't even know what it's going to look like. New curriculum, new assessment. But I will tell you, with the changes in leadership that Dr. Markley has put in place there, we are seeing improvement already. Next year, with those schools, we have a plan, and we're looking at, we're going in, we're saying, we're going to do some short cycle assessments, see what teachers need, see what students need, and instruction will be in there meeting with teachers every 3 weeks going over their data. We're not going to let them just have it and then say, you go and do your thing. We're going to be more directive and understanding that, yes, the principal is the instructional leader of the building, but as you stated, we're not seeing the movement that, based on the resources that we should see. So more support, actual people sitting down with the teachers is what our plan is, along with the priority funding. So it's not just giving them the money.
There is some special programming. Forest Hills, their Spanish immersion program will get their first set of test results next year. And there's always been good research on what that does. She's looking at converting the school to an IB school. In fact, she'll be here probably in August to talk about that process.
At Forest Hills?
At Forest Hills. And I've asked Jerry Oates, who's going over to Williston, to look at some kind of sixth grade program, because Forest Hill feeds into them, that can pick up those kids coming in and continue that success I think we're seeing there. Bob's put in a new discipline program this year at Alderman that we're expanding to Williston, and he had some good success over there with that as well. So we've seen some new principals in place, some new leadership, and it's moving in the direction that we need it to move in.
You may not be in a position to address this, but, you know, a lot of these are what I call downtown schools. I mean, I have long said, because I used to live downtown, that there is no such thing as an inner-city school in Wilmington. Wilmington has no inner city, but it does have downtown schools. And I note that one obvious missing component here is Gregory. How is Gregory doing?
Gregory is really showing some progress. A lot has gone on this year with the new principal there as well. And Gregory is one of the schools that we support, but they're not state identified.
Okay.
These are your state identified schools.
Okay.
And with the focus schools, why they're different from Snipes, even though they're flat, their high achieving students and their low achieving students have the biggest gap of schools across the state. So they've got high achieving kids and they have low achieving kids, and it's getting wider and wider. So the state says you've got to focus and find out what's going on there. If they're able to work with their higher achieving students and being successful, that's great. But what are they doing with their low achieving students?
Absolutely.
So that's why they're called a focus school.
And you would notice on those schools, that's where you have some of the widest disparity in terms of top and bottom, in terms of demographics. You got a top and a bottom, and there's not a lot of middle in there in terms of socioeconomics.
So like I said, we've met with the principals, we've talked to them. They are very excited about that short cycle assessment plan because the teachers really want to know, what can I do to improve? How can I meet the needs of all my students? And so we're working very closely with them with this new priority allocation plan. This is different for them. They've had the funding, but we put it where they said they want it versus sitting down and making them tell us, how are you going to use this money? You have the flexibility, but how are you going to use it? So they have their decision making, but at the same time, we're doing more of monitoring it tightly. With Dr. Markley's support of us going into the schools to do this, I think it's going to be well received. But I understand about the additional fund balance funding. We can reposition and work with what we have. We will do what we need to do. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Roman numeral 9, consensus items. Item A, personnel, appendix G. Dr. Wilmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We recommend the board approve the personnel matters as presented.
Move for approval.
Second.
Comments, questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Item B, change of school assignment, appendix T. Dr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, I respectfully request that you approve this change of school assignment to another county based on the fact that the child is the child of an employee in that county.
Move for approval.
Second.
Comments, questions? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Item Roman numeral 10, old business. Item A, policies on for second reading. Mrs. Nichols.
We have policies from 3 categories. Do you want to, we'll take them separately for the categories then. The first one was 1234 Board of Education Committee representatives. So unless there are any questions about that, remember we've reviewed this quite often. So ready for asking for approval for second reading?
Okay, you want to do these individually?
We'll do, yes, because there are 3
Okay.
categories.
I second the motion.
Which, was that a motion that you made?
Yeah, you may.
Okay.
Yes.
No. Any comments or questions on, we're talking about policy 1234.
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved.
And
Thank
then
you.
we'll update the board website with the deletion and the addition. So that'll be taken care of. The next category is from the technology department. So if you have any questions, Mrs. Princeton will be able to answer them for you. Any additional questions from the last meeting? There are 3 policies there.
Okay, 4221, 4225.
And 6086.
6086.
Yes. No questions?
I had raised the question at the last meeting about the term home base, the fact it said, used to say NC-WISE ID and password policy. Discussion about home base, which is the replacement program we understand for NC-WISE. I note that it is not in the title. Is that intentional, or is that because you don't know, or what's the deal with?
It is in the revised title.
Oh, it's not in the
revised
copy
title
I've
says
got.
home base and password policy.
Okay, I'm sorry. The copy I have on my site didn't have it, so.
Sorry about that.
I have a question, policy 4221, and maybe it's just a bit redundant, but the bottom of page 1, the new included language that individual schools shall have through the Media Technology Advisory Committee a procedure in place, blah, blah, blah. Could we just place instead of a procedure, a written procedure?
Most definitely, we can make that change.
Are we voting on 4221 and 4225 at the same time?
Yes, and 606,
Yeah, they were-
6086.
Yeah, those three,
Okay. And is there a motion on,
well, I think Dr. Hickey just asked for a change. What was that change, Dr. Hickey? The
Policy
at the end of
4221.
page 1?
Yeah, bottom of page 1 of policy 4221 just goes, it's about the purchase of apps, which we ran into earlier this year. It says that the Media Technology Advisory Committee will make a procedure. I just wanted to add the word written procedure so that it was clear that it would be written and it wouldn't just be, Joan says
Spoken.
we do this, yeah.
Not a problem, we can make that change.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Were there any other questions on those three? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're passed.
And the last category, 7440, is from Student Support Department, and this is on promotion and accountability. And Dr. Holliday presented this the last board
Yes.
meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This policy, as I mentioned, is an update of our occupational course of study to make sure that those requirements are in policy 7440. So it just brings that up to date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Comments, questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. That was it, correct?
Yes, and the policy committee met today, and we had quite a few, and so we'll bring those in August for first reading.
Okay. Item B, bond projects priorities, Appendix I, Mr. Hance.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to call on Mr. Anderson to make the bond presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We want to provide a quick update and go over in a little detail with you some recommended updates and changes. How you doing? Which button do I push?
He said he thought this was going to be at the retreat. And this is an action item?
Excuse me, Mr. Anderson, could I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
It was my understanding that the board was going to deal with the bond issue at the retreat, and I'm just confused as to why we're having a presentation about it today.
This is an update from a joint meeting we held with the county manager and some of his staff as it relates to a bond in terms of the potential amount that we would discuss. So we wanted to review those projects with you and just make sure you were aware. And so when you head into your retreat, you'll have the latest information. Bill Hanson and Mary Hazel were both at that meeting with the county staff.
Well, I know they've come up with a figure, but yet we're not being asked to go ahead and approve.
Now, we want to make sure you got the priority list and you understand what's on it, and we'll talk about what those next steps are at the end of this.
But this
then
is...
why is it under
Oh,
new business?
Yeah. I mean,
It's
Or
under-
old business, rather?
it's an action, that makes it an
Yeah, it's
action
an
item.
action item.
That's what that's why I was raising, I could see it under the superintendent's report, but as being part of old business, it would be an action item. I mean, I don't understand.
That's my fault. I probably should have put it under information. I'm used to putting things under new business for action. I put this under old business, but in hindsight, I should have put it under information. We want to present the updates and changes so you'll have some time before the retreat to look at it and maybe ask some questions, and then we could discuss it further at the retreat.
Okay.
My apologies. Should have been under information.
Mr. Anderson, I like the graphics. I thought apples grew on trees, but now I've learned something.
Not here. Thank you. Just brief timeline, that we started with a facility needs survey. As you know, we maintain a long-range facility plan. We update it every 5 years. The last one was submitted in 2011, 12 fiscal year. From that, we put together a list of needs, and at a board retreat in January, the board took the priority items that we had identified and put them in priority order. Based on those priorities, we did a cash flow and presented that to the county. They were looking at their debt service based on our cash flow projections and the total amount of all the priorities. And then we had a meeting, as Dr. Markley said, on June 3rd with the county, and we want to update you on that meeting now. In general, the outcome of the meeting is that the county staff are supportive of a local school bond referendum. The amount that they gave us was $160 million, and they would like that school bond referendum to be in the fall of 2014. So going back to the board retreat on January 23rd, that's the last action that the board took in approving these priorities. So if you looked at $160 million, hit next one, that carries you down through priority 14, which is Riceville Beach. And that's approximately $160 million. Next slide. So tonight we want to give you two options to look at. We do need to make some updates. As I mentioned, this was done in January. There have been some changes, and also a couple of minor changes to consider, since we now know what the dollar amount that is being proposed. So in option number one, this is the January 23rd list. The first change. When we were looking at this in January, we were hoping for a 2013 bond referendum. This is 2014. We've inflated the numbers to 2017, moving them 1 year. I can tell you across the state in school construction, there's a lot of conversation about construction cost, especially as the market is starting to turn around a little bit. We're seeing some movement. There's a big concern about construction cost. So I think that is necessary. The second item, we took land out of item number 2. The county does not want to fund the purchase of the property out of the bond referendum. They want to work with the school board in purchasing that separately. The good thing is that they do want us to proceed with the land purchase, not wait on the bond referendum. And then the last update is we want to reduce the district-wide building and infrastructure improvements. There are two items that were included in some capital funding since this was put together, so we deleted those. It's about $500,000. And again, if you go down the list to the proposed $160 million, that again is at item number 14, which is Riceville Beach additions and renovations. Option number 2, we'll start. This is again the January 23rd list with the updates that were proposed. I want to show you just the changes. We're recommending that we shift down the district-wide technology priority number 2. Leave priority number 1 in the bond referendum. Number 2 continues the implementation of voice over IP. It's a dollar amount. It's a smaller dollar amount. We think we can continue that effort through our capital. And priority number 1 gets the infrastructure in the schools that we need to be able to implement this. The second change is shifting up Myrtle Grove renovations. We think that the middle schools that we identified as the highest priority, they are a big priority. Myrtle Grove with the 160 was being cut out. We think that's a higher priority been the district-wide technology improvements. And we are able to look at our annual capital for the technology improvements, but not for the Myrtle Grove renovations, just because of the cost. And then to balance that out to $160 million, we would look at the 4 middle schools and reduce each one of those by an equal amount to get to the 160. Somehow we've got to round this off to 160. Looking at the middle schools, and the reason we chose these, again, the facility survey was done in 2010, 2011. And since then, we've made significant improvements. If you've been to Rolling Grice or if you've been to Noble this summer, you'll see a lot of work going on. We've been replacing the HVAC system. We've made some electrical improvements. While there are still needs at the middle school, we're comfortable with using those middle school projects to reduce, to get to the $160 million.
Mr. Anderson, why on option 2, unless it's yet to come, is the, well, maybe it is. I can't read what you've got up there, but is the land acquisition still in that one?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right, that's my, I can't find a chart that looks like yours on this one.
We'll send you this as a separate PowerPoint so you can have it with you for the retreat.
That would be outstanding.
We'll do that.
Oh, maybe here it is.
And the next slide,
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
again,
It is.
if you go down to 160 million, we're again at priority number 14. So you can see with the updates and the changes we're recommending, they are minor in nature, and we're always staying at that same priority number. So the next steps, we're presenting this for your consideration. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. We do need to approve the projects that would be included in the bond referendum, because we'll need to provide cash flow projections to the county, and then we'll look at putting together a preliminary schedule for implementing this. And then after the retreat, the board would look to have a joint meeting with the county commissioners.
If I remember correctly, Ms. Kudrow was suggesting sometime early in the fall.
Mr. Hayes, the money that the county has kind of said they're willing to help us out with, initially I thought it was not only land acquisition, but they might all would go ahead and provide the money for the planning phase of the new elementary school in the northern part of the county, which would tend to possibly cut short. I mean, if we go into a 2014 bond issue with the planning already done,
Right.
then you would be able to almost immediately move forward with starting the construction, which means that
The way that those initial discussions have worked out, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong here, is land, design, and get that school up and running, and then once the bond's passed, bond picks up those costs, but they're committed to working with us to building that northern elementary school with or without the bond. Mr. Hayes?
that was my understanding.
To
and
get
so-
started prior to.
So we could, I mean,
bond.
we're not really
It's not-
necessarily having to talk about 2016, 2017 inflation numbers, but rather maybe late 2014, early 15, something like that.
Yeah, it's not just the land purchase numbers.
I
it's
understand.
design dollars as well.
But,
Right.
the implication I was getting was that while we might get the land, that you were anticipating having to wait till after the bond to
Yeah,
start the
our
design
meeting
work.
with the county, we did talk about that, and they're in agreement. As soon as we have the land, to get started on design immediately.
Okay, all right, well, I'm, a million here, a million there, I mean.
Pretty soon you got a school.
It also moves some of these other projects potentially up.
Yeah.
See, and that's the problem that I think we're looking at, that has such a bearing on other things that are high priorities, in that if we look at, say, 2013 to purchase the land, 2014 to do the design, 2 years to build the school, we're looking at, say, at the beginning of 2017 to even occupy a new school up, say, in the Porter's Neck area. Then, depending upon the other priorities that the way they work out, as far as a swing site, if we were to use that school for a swing site, to do the work at Wrightsville Beach and some, College Park and Blair, then it's going to make it even later. So those
Right.
are a lot of things that.
The county's willingness to work with us on this school outside of the bond process makes the 2014 bond date workable.
Good.
It's not optimal, but the fact that they're willing to work with us on this first school, getting that up and running and getting started, means that we can make the 2014 bond date work. If we weren't moving forward on land and school outside of the bond, it would really slow down our needs.
And they understood that from the very beginning, the county commissioners did, in the importance of the school in Portage Neck, for us to be moving, not waiting until 2014.
I just want to be clear that
Right.
that's what we would.
Yeah, the county's been very cooperative on that northern school.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'll send this PowerPoint presentation out to you.
If you've got questions prior to the retreat date, please get those to us ahead of time so we can get you any background information we can.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Item C, renewal contract with Univers County Health Department for school-based mental health service, Appendix J. Dr. Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You heard a presentation earlier tonight, and I respectfully ask that you approve this renewal of this contract.
Which one?
Catch up here. Okay, you've heard Dr. Holliday's recommendations. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Dr. Hickey, he's the second man today.
Not for this one.
Well, for the sake of discussion, I will second. So now it's open for discussion. Are there comments or questions?
Well, I guess my comment would be that, I'm just reiterating my prior concerns. I think we could do this more efficiently. I'm not averse to the school system subsidizing this partially. I just think if we could do it without subsidizing it to the tune of $430,000. And we have other priorities that we, need this money to address. So I'm speaking out against this current proposal. I'd like them to come back with a revised proposal showing a more efficient use of resources, whether that means more schools or less personnel addressing these 16 high-priority schools. But at the end of the day, we need to focus on instruction. So,
I would have to say too, I'm concerned about the lack of incentive to be more cost efficient. There's really nothing, and I hesitate to use this word, but they can offer the Cadillac because there's no incentive not to, when a Toyota may work, in terms of services, in terms of, I didn't hear anything about, if you have a therapist who doesn't take insurance, is the child then, I just struggle with the fact that we're paying for, I think it was 549 students. We're paying this amount of money, and there just doesn't seem to be any kind of incentive for cost efficiency or cost savings. And I too would like to see that built into this. It's what you have to deal with when you do have insurance. You have a limited number of visits, and it's certainly not ideal. But to me, neither is this, because there's no incentive to not look at that, not look at how we can still provide services, but be more efficient and more aware of the costs.
Mr. Chairman, I think based on the discussion I've heard, that this is a matter that needs to come back to us. There needs to be further investigation. I think there's a great deal of concern about the the cost that we're being asked to pick up. Therefore, I would make a motion that we table this to the August 6th meeting.
I second the motion.
Table it to the August 6th meeting.
Which is our next board meeting, and during that time, I would call on Dr. Holliday to meet with the folks from mental health, and as Dr. Hickey has suggested, either provide us greater services or come back with a lower figure.
Okay, do we need, who made the motion to?
Do I need to withdraw my motion?
I think a motion to table takes precedence.
Okay.
Okay, was there a second on yours?
I seconded the
Okay.
motion to.
Any comments or questions
table.
on Mr. Higgins? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll table it to the August 6th meeting. Thank you. Item D, school attendance zones, Appendix S, Dr. Markley.
There's been a lot of discussion on the last several meetings related to school attendance zones. Mr. Bullitt, our attorney, has prepared a resolution. I think that clarifies some of this, and I will ask him to present it and explain.
The resolution states that in 2008, the board's intent was to place the Anchors Bend subdivision in the Castle Hayne Elementary Zone. It states that it has in fact appeared on the maps in Castle Hayne since then, and it just clarifies that that was the board's intent, and from this point forward, that subdivision will be in the Castle Hayne Elementary attendance zone, unless the board, by future action, redistricts.
Mr. Hayes, as a point, it's working. As a point of parliamentary procedure, this resolution, which we didn't read in its entirety, has a whole bunch of whereas clauses. Now, I agree with every single one of the whereas clauses. I think from prior discussions and from your discussions during the redistricting, that it was always the intent to place the Anchors Bend subdivision in Castle Hayne. And the reason for that intent was that we anticipated that the Anchors Bend and all these other subdivisions would have a large amount of growth over the ensuing years, and that Ogden Elementary would be unable to manage that additional capacity. You know, we've heard from parents tonight that we're talking about 8 students. 4 students who are currently at Ogden. So we're talking about a net of 4 students. We're also talking about these students having an hour and 30-minute transit time. Now, part of that transit time is because our buses have to get the children to school half an hour early so they could have a free breakfast if they qualify. But in any case, we're talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds getting on a bus at 6:30 in the morning, which means they need to get up at 6 in the morning, and not beginning school until 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, if I had a 2-hour transit time on the way to work, I would be exhausted, and I'm not 5 years old. I'm a little bit older than that. So I agree with all the whereases, but I would like to make an unfriendly amendment, and I would say, you know, now be it resolved, blah, 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 and I'd like to change the language to say that in the best interest of the students of Anchors Bend and in the interest of the district, that Anchors Bend subdivision will be in the Ogden Elementary school attendance zone from this date forward. So a contrary, you know, resolved to the currently proposed resolution.
So you're changing the very end of it.
I'm keeping all of the whereases because I think they are totally accurate and I agree. And I am changing the resolved, which of course is the standalone motion on which we will vote.
I will second the motion for purposes of discussion.
My question is, what happens when the next subdivision shows up?
Well, that was going to be my question, Mr. Higgins, but I wanted to second it so we could discuss it.
Well, you've already seconded it, that was my
Well,
question.
my answer is that as the Board of Education, you know, we're responsible for the welfare of the students that we have today. And where responsible for the efficient allocation of resources that we have today. Should these other subdivisions come online, if at that time we cannot accommodate them, we can simply say, we cannot accommodate you.
What if we can no longer accommodate Acres Bend?
Well, from what I've heard.
What if Acres Bend has a growth spurt?
Well,
And we have said from this day forward, they will go to Ogden, and Acres Bend has a growth spurt. What do you do then?
Well, previously, you know, from data that Mr. Hans has provided us, Ogden had 40 more students there. Is that the data we have, somewhere around 40 students, or is it more than 40 students? Mr. Hayes is looking at it currently, I think.
Yeah, I brought my folder because I had some conversations with Mr. Hance along these lines. You're asking about the overcrowding at Ogden now?
Well, at the highest level, how many students had been previously were accommodated at Ogden?
In the 2008-2009 school year, there were 735.
And how many are there now?
As of the 2012-2013 year, there were 693.
And it's built for what?
The capacity is 625. So right now, we are, say, roughly 68. Well, not roughly, that's exact.
We're over capacity
68.
everywhere. So, I mean, every single high school we have is over capacity. Just about every elementary school is over capacity, with the exception of Castle Hayne, which is just about at capacity and will likely be at capacity this next year. So, you know, I mean, I share your concerns, Ms. Kavanaugh. I just think that it's, and I guess I'm rolling the dice a little bit, in the sense that if there is a huge growth spurt, then I will look like I made a very bad decision.
See, you know, I don't disagree with the thing you're saying, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to get into this a little bit, because I pulled the map that Mr. Hance had provided for the board and called him last week and went place by place: Glendarden, Middle Sound Village, Ridgefield, Anchors Bend, Lopez Division, Winds Harbor, Macy Landing Yacht Club, all these other satellites in there. And did we not, Mr. Hanson, went item by item determining how many students are there now? And there's zero. And my understanding that in Anchors Bend right now, there are 2 students, both of those whom go to Eaton, and there might be some others in Marsh Oaks that will be in Anchors Bend who are currently in Ogden. I understand all that. So I don't disagree with you at all, and I certainly want the parents to know, we certainly, as a board, when we made the decision we made, when this redistricting was done, the worry I have is what I alluded to earlier, and that's why I brought that up. 2013 is going to be to purchase land. 2014 is going to be to design a school. 15 and 16 are going to be to build a school. 2017 would be the earliest that we could possibly redistrict. You know, and I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen between now and 2017 in this area with everything that's taking place there. And even in 2017, depending on what happens at Gregory, that's why all this stuff is just hinged on each other. Well, we could possibly use some of that area as a swing site.
Oh, okay.
That's why I bring that up.
All right, okay.
That we might not have to use the new school at Porter's Neck as a swing site. Correct, Dr. Markle? We had discussed that possibly.
Possibly, it's tight.
Right. I mean, it's just another option because we
Mr.
don't
Hansel-
know.
Mr. Hansel looks at me and says, if he doesn't have a swing site, he's in.
Gregory, depending on if you have 500 students, Gregory's not going to be able to accommodate 500 students with the student population it has right now.
See, and if that doesn't happen, then when we looked at our bond proposals up here as far as priorities, we're going to replace
Blair and College.
Blair and College Park schools. They're going to be torn down and rebuilt. When we did that at Winter Park, when we did that at Forest Hills, when we did that at other sites, we had to have a swing site to move those schools to while that construction took place. So it might not be 2017 when we have a new elementary school coming online that we would then redistrict. It might be 2018, 2019. That's what worries me, Dr. Hickey, in that if that's 6, possibly 7 years down the road, and I don't know what's going to happen in Anchors Bend and so forth, and because right now, Ogden is over 68 students as we speak. Of course, 4 of those, are currently there. We understand that, but still, that's still 64 over. it makes it difficult, because we certainly understand about riding right by the school, certainly.
Well, Mr. Hayes, I know this is, again, unpopular. What I'm about to say, I know what I just said was unpopular among probably everyone else at this table. I'm going to say something which is probably equally unpopular to the parents of Anchors Bend. We could allow them to go for this current school year with the understanding that if Anchors Bend builds up, then we may have to move all of their children to Castle Hayne. And I know it's unpopular because we've just had student assignment hearings, and we do know that if we give them 1 year and then, you know, it becomes overcrowded, they're going to come back and with the same arguments, and now their kids are going to be sad because they're losing their friends. And I get all that, but at the same time, you know, it's a more efficient use of resources. And it's clearly, even if it's just for a year or for 2 years, I mean, how many hours in a child's life are we talking about over those 2 years? It's clearly better for those children, even if it's only for 2 years. And I know that, you know, I know everyone on this board is loath to make that decision, but I still think it'd be a better decision. And so I guess I have, you know, 2 motions to discuss, and then I'd be willing to vote for either of those. And of course, you can all tell me I'm crazy and vote me down completely, and that's fine too. But these are the thoughts I've been having on the issue.
Well, I do kind of think you're crazy, but I don't think you're wrong. Just kidding.
Thank you.
I mean, I really struggle with the 6:30 a.m. too. I mean, I can't picture my, you know, 8, 9-year-old getting on a bus well, being at the bus stop at 6:20. You know,
Drive down Carolina Beach Road at 6:20 in the morning. They're out there.
well, according to transportation, the only other 2 schools are schools of choice that deliver that early or pick up that early. And those you're choosing to go to, and I still struggle with that. I just think 6:30 is insane. But it's a long day. I wish there were a solution that would allow these kids to be closer. And I would ask, why can we not include Eaton in the discussion of possibly adding more students? I know it's a year-round option, but would that be, given the overcrowding at every other school, to me, it would make sense not to make any school untouchable, as Eaton and Coddington are.
Now, I don't think that's true, is it, Mr. Hanson? I know in the past, when you might be right, but my understanding in the past was that when we looked at numbers, as far as percentages that were overcrowded and so forth, that Eaton and Coddington were suffering, so to speak, just like everyone else. Is that not correct?
Yes, they're both full. They're both totally full.
And they have, both of them have trailers.
And they have 3 mobile units each.
I know we've been asked to put additional units, say at Coddington, for example, but we can't due to space limitations, and I think the same thing's true there. So I think that, I don't like to use the word suffering, but to me, they're as overcrowded as percentage-wise as the
And
other
if there's
schools.
an opening at those schools in the upper grades, we open those up to lottery. So it's not like a case where you start with a one-size pool and it shrinks by the time it gets to 5th grade.
But if we're not willing to bend, no pun intended, you know, and you know, which is why I had made the suggestion to wait the lottery applications for those students in Anchors Bend. It certainly wouldn't, it would give them a better opportunity, a better chance at getting a slot in that school. It's not a guarantee of you know, enrollment, but it does give them at least an option. And I think, you know, it's conciliatory, basically, but we can give that opportunity. I think probably the vast majority of those parents have probably applied to Eaton. Okay. So, you know, we weight those applications quite routinely, actually, for different reasons. And I don't see why we couldn't do that in this case.
See, here again, I don't disagree with you, but I haven't counted all the various satellites in the Ogden district.
Well,
Now,
but
are we gonna do the same
waiting the
thing?
application doesn't guarantee
I know, but are we going to do the
enrollment,
same thing?
is what I'm saying.
For the other satellites?
You very well could.
I mean, I'm not opposed to any of that. I'm just asking a question.
Well, I'm against weighting in general, because it's sort of discriminatory.
Thought you were.
So, yeah, I don't care what the reason for weighting is. I mean, I think that the reason to make this decision for this subdivision is because it makes sense for these children, and it makes sense from the district. I mean, I haven't done the math, Mr. Hans may have, you know, the amount of extra miles we're going to have to run a bus in order to get these children from Anchors. I mean, additional, if the bus is going somewhere else too, then we can discount those miles, but the additional miles that will, and how much money that will cost.
I can't tell you the additional miles above and beyond what it is right now. We can calculate that easy enough, though, but they would be picked up between 6:35, 6:40, delivered to the school by 7:20 in the mornings. So,
But school doesn't start till 8, and so,
Right.
so unless you're planning
But they'll
on,
still
you know.
be delivered there. They
Unless
won't
you're
be-
unless you're a free breakfast person, then you're just killing 40 minutes in the morning.
Mr. Hance, why can't they be picked up at 6:45, 7 o'clock?
well, if you have the buses to do that, you can, but that would be an issue because of the number of buses we have. We could run a special bus over there just for them, pick them up and take them over there, but then that adds another bus to our fleet and decreases our efficiency overall.
And costs how much money? Like
What
thousands,
is it
like,
per mile?
First of all, we only have picking up.
This is Ken Nance, Director of Transportation.
We're already picking up students in the satellites in that area that go to Castle Hayne. We pick up on Savannah and also at Chablis Way, and then we come back towards Castle Hayne. So we're already over there for satellites. Last year we picked up at 6:25 at when we started at Savannah, and then we had to go up Market and pick up on Chablis Way. Then we cut across. So actually, we're just going back across to pick up over at Anchors Bend on the way up to the school.
So you're already picking up children earlier than you would be picking up the Anchors Bend children?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
We
you.
start at 6:25 because
you'd
of
have
the
to
distance
push
we have to
them up.
travel.
You'd have to push them up, I'm assuming, the kids
Well,
that you're
we're going
picking
to
up.
adjust the schedule and change some of the students on the end of the run to make it so we want to pick them up any earlier. We'll pick up around 6:25 at Savannah, and then about 6:35 to 6:40 at Anchors Bend. Then we'll go up to Chablis Way, and then we'll go back to Castle Hayne. But we're already doing 2 satellites in that same area already.
Thank you.
But those are the Blair, they're satellites in the Blair district, not the Ogden district.
Mr. Hance, does anyone know, in looking, because I'm thinking about what Dr. Hickey said, in that in Anchors Bend, for example, according to this map, it says 205 units. Does that mean there's room to build 205 homes?
That's correct.
In Anchors Bend?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess, do we know how many are in there now? How many homes are actually built?
No. I don't know exactly how many are built right now at this point.
Because evidently there's some construction getting ready to take place, from what I'm hearing. I think it's from Marsh Oaks or whatever. I guess, Dr. Hickey, my comment would be, if we were to allow it, say, for a year, what are we going to decide? How overcrowded we're going to let Ogden become before we do something? Because right now, I mean, we would have to do something if we're looking 6, 7 years down the road, if the expansion continues. How overcrowded are we willing to let, because there's nothing we can do, if I understand correctly, Mr. Hance, as far as Ogden, as far as, I know it's been suggested, mobile units, things of this nature.
yeah, well, in some respects, though, to your question, I know it was sort of it was an open question that wasn't meant to be answered, rhetorical, if you will. But we already do that as a Board of Education. You know, we decide to redistrict, a sort of district-wide redistrict, when it becomes untenable. You know, so we could come up with a number at which we would say, well, I'm sorry, but above this number, all of Anchors Bend has to be districted to Castle Hayne. And I don't know if that number is, you know, an additional 15 students or an additional 20 students. And of course, if you're the 20th student, everyone's going to hate you in the neighborhood.
But that feels very arbitrary. I don't feel comfortable making that decision and that call. I don't know the numbers of kids in Ogden right now.
Well, I know, but this call is just as arbitrary. I mean, the problem is that, we're always called upon to ask arbitrary decisions. I don't know what the situation in Ogden is right now either. I mean, as far as I know, the situation in Ogden right now could be untenable, and as a board, we should be redistricting more kids to Castle Hayne this moment. I mean, I don't know that. I'm not
And
being...
how do we know which of the satellites are going to be built in this coming year? I mean, it could very easily be that 10 other satellites have kids at homes within the next year, and we pick Anchor's Bend to stay at Ogden, and all of the rest of the satellites go to Castle Hayne.
Well, then they're welcome to petition the board, just like Anchor's Bend has.
But you do have students on the Blair District satellites who understood that that's their district and they're getting picked up at 6:30 in the morning. Then do we change the rules for them?
Well, let's be clear. In 2008, when this board did its redistricting, we looked at the potential subdivisions that had no current children in them. And that's how we chose which subdivisions would go to Castle Hayne, because we felt that rather than redistricting kids who were already living in the area, that it would be better for parents to know that if you go into this subdivision, this is the school you're going to go to. It was not going to be a surprise to them. It was not going to just kind of be thrust upon them. And, I don't even know why we're talking about this resolution. I think the board handled this in 2008, and I think we need to just, I feel bad for some of these kids, but the fact is, the board made a decision in 2008, and I think the board needs to stay with its original decision.
Well, Mr. Higgins, I agree with all the whereas statements. I will respectfully tell you, however, that we are we're elected representatives of our constituents, which are the citizens of New Hanover County. And it's their right to petition us for changes in what school their children go to. So that's kind of why we're doing this tonight, because we've been asked to by these residents to discuss this. If they hadn't asked us, we wouldn't be discussing it, but they have. And these people, they pay taxes, they fund the school system. These public schools, man, we've been discussing hundreds of millions of dollars tonight. $160 million bond referendum. Everything we've talked about tonight has a line item number of dollars associated with it that these people provide with their taxes. So that's why we're discussing this, is because they've asked us to discuss it. And that's to that question, and again, it still doesn't change. And the fact that in 2008, that was a really good decision you made in 2008, doesn't mean that in 2013, we can't make a better decision.
I'd like to call the question.
Well, I want to make sure I understand exactly, because I think you've said two different things, Dr. Hickey, that, we could, but if we really wanted to get technical, parliamentary, it would take a 2/3 vote, and I don't think we'd have that right now. Let me ask Dr. Hickey another question. Are you saying that, am I correct, Mr. Bullard? That's correct. Okay. That one of your suggestions, Dr. Hickey, was that students that are currently at Ogden that would be in the Anchors Bend division, subdivision, could remain there.
Well, I was thinking more towards we allow everyone in Anchors Bend to go this year at least, and then we just reassess it, and we can leave that up to student services to say it's too crowded. We can take the political process out of it. When Dr. Holliday's staff says, hey, we've got too many students, we can redistrict all of Anchors Bend. But I don't think, just because we are uncomfortable making difficult decisions, and maybe making them more than once, that, we just throw these kids, and again, under the bus.
Yeah, and I don't mind going along with what you're suggesting, but I guess my thought process is, okay, suppose at the end of that year, and I know there's a lot of suppose in here, we don't have crystal balls and so forth, But suppose it has gone up dramatically, and we say, look, we really wanted to do this, but we can't. Is it going to make it even tougher then, a year from now, for example?
Well, it won't make it tougher for me to make the decision, because at that point, I will be making the only decision that I can make based on the interests of the school system. Currently, the school system can accommodate 4 additional children at Ogden, which is why this is a difficult decision for me, because they're asking for something that will improve their students, their children's lives, and we can accommodate them. So that's why this is a difficult decision for me, because I'm thinking about these 8 students and what it means to them. I'm not thinking about what this difficult decision today means to this board.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure I understand what we're voting on. So you're saying that if they're there now, they may remain?
No, I'm saying let everyone from Anchors Bend go to Ogden Elementary for this current school year, and if it grows to a size that we can no longer accommodate Anchors Bend, then, you know, we won't permanently district them to Ogden, but we'll allow them to attend Ogden for this school year, and we'll revisit capacity next year.
Does everyone understand what Dr. Hickey's suggesting?
Sounds like what he's proposing is that the equivalent of an appeal hearing, that they would appeal their assignment to Kessel Hayne and be granted.
No, you're right. The action will be equivalent, but they don't have grounds to appeal. The point being is that this board, this previous board, who when they redistricted, at least in my opinion, were clear on where Anchors Bend was supposed to be. And so based on that, you know, these people didn't have grounds for a hardship hearing. But again, they are citizens of New Hanover County, and because of that, they are entitled to bring their concerns, to petition their elected officials for a redress of, you know, a grievance or a need. And so I would say the motion I'm making has the same effect as if we granted them a hardship appeal, but with the consideration that they had no grounds for a hardship accommodation.
Of course, in every hardship appeal that's approved, it's understood that it's only approved for 1 year.
Correct.
Any other questions?
I don't like the idea of children getting on the bus at 6:30, but when I found out that we're already picking up children at 6:30, and these would be after the children that are being picked up at 6:15 and 6:20, it's hard for me to justify voting in favor of reassigning them when other children will still be picked up at 6:15 and 6:20.
And these are children other than those of the choice schools, the magnet schools
Yes.
where the parents have...
According to...
I think they're in the Blair district. I think he said they were in the Blair district subdivisions.
Mr. Hance, how many are we currently transporting from the satellites?
Right now, I think the satellites themselves, I'm holding this on about 4 or 5.
From both Blair and Ogden, or?
On Savannah, which I think is Blair, there's 2 or 3 right there, and we go up Market, pick up on Cheverly West, and there's a few students there also.
All of them are in Blair District except for the 2 that are going to Eaton right now from the Ogden District.
And I would go back to what I said when you asked me this question several meetings ago. If you're going to do it for this group, then you've got to go back and look at the other 4.
I realize. That's why I said I don't like sending kids at 6:30, but you already have children. If we're going to change it for Anchors Bend, we would have to change it for the other children also.
You're talking about for the satellites in the Blair district?
We'd have to give them the option. I mean,
Well, we don't have to. I'd probably be in favor of it, to be honest with you, if we could accommodate them for the same reasons of talking about these people. But again, as a Board of Education, we district children based on what's best for the children and on the needs of the school system. And so I think in this particular case that we're discussing tonight, it's better for these children, and the school system can accommodate it. And so it's an easy decision for me to let them go for 1 year. And again, if it turns around that we can't accommodate them a year from now or 2 years from now, well, then it's an easy decision, at least for me. It won't be for them. They'll be, you know, equally upset about it, but at least then it's a cut and dry decision. Hey, we tried, and it just didn't work out.
Mr. Hance, how overcrowded, since we're going down this path, how overcrowded is Blair?
Well, based on the projections that I'm looking at, most current projections for next school year, Blair will be only 14 students over capacity. Ogden will be 65 students over capacity.
Do you have any idea how many of the children in these other satellites we're talking about that are being picked up early now in the Blair district that are being transported to Castle Hayne?
The number Mr. Nance said, which is 4 to 6.
4 to 6 that would be at Blair, that would be at
That's correct.
Castle Hayne now. And the
That's
same thing
correct.
would be true, I guess, of in the Ogden district. If we look at Anchor's Bend, very few students. So we're only talking less than, what, say, a half dozen students per school? Is that
Per
based
school,
upon current
yes.
figures?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, I have no problem with if the administration wants to come back with a recommendation about the other children who are getting on the bus at 6:20 and 6:15, but I'm not prepared tonight to vote for just this one population
Yeah.
when the other children would not be changed.
I agree that. That's why I was asking about Blair, because if all we're talking about is, say, a half dozen children
I agree.
in the
And
Blair
I'd be
district
very
and a half
favorable to
dozen
the
in the
superintendent
Ogden
coming back
district,
with a
then
recommendation.
I would be more inclined to go along with what Dr. Hickey is suggesting.
Yes.
Well, okay.
Should we-
If you go along with what Dr. Hickey suggested, it's basically a quasi-appeal approval by this board. Is that going to include everything that goes with a quasi,
We don't
with
have
an
to do
appeal, and that is that
We can do it in
the parents would be required to furnish transportation?
Say
If we approve an appeal, what the deal is, the parents have to furnish transportation.
Well, that's true in the appeal process, but also in the appeal process that we've, over the years, have allowed, if there is a bus in the area and they don't have to, we allow them to ride the bus, I'll just put it that way.
Would, there would not be a bus.
But technically, I mean,
In the Blair, those, yeah,
Yeah,
there
the
are.
Blair there would, but not in the Anchor's Bend.
Is there no bus in the Ogden area that goes by Anchor's Bend?
If they are,
The bus goes to pick up at the Blair satellites and transports to Castle Hayne. There's, the 2 students at Eaton do not ride our bus that I know of.
That are in Anchor's Bend now?
That
they
are
go
at
to
Anchor's
Eaton.
Bend now. They go to
Right.
Eaton. They're transported by their parents to Eaton.
Well, for that small
We
number, I
have-
don't really think that would be a problem.
Mr. Hayes, are you still not going to let me call the question?
Well, I just want to make,
You have to have 2/3 to approve calling the question.
yeah,
Well, we don't know whether we got 2/3 or not.
you don't.
Oh, thank you.
Well, all right, here's my other question. I have been on this board long enough and been to enough appeals hearings to know that once the child is out of school, they're there. And, Dr. Hickey can talk all he wants to about 1 year, and then we look again, and 1 year. The only way I would agree to allow Anchor's Bend to go to Ogden, and for the people in Blair District to go to Blair, is that it be understood that next year they would get their assignments, and they would have to appeal that assignment just like anybody else did.
I agree with that.
In which case, then the board can then decide, based on what Dr. Holliday provides us, as to whether or not there is an issue of overcrowding or undercrowding or whatever, but that any allowance of any of these satellite subdivisions going, and I do this reluctantly, is going to, part of the motion would have to require that next year, students who are in these satellites would be assigned to Castle Hayne, and if the parents so chose, they would then need to appeal that decision to the board.
Go through the appeal process.
Through the appeal process, so that we have an opportunity to do, as Dr. Hickey suggests, review whether or not there is a crowding
Okay.
problem, so that the information we were given about Anchors Bend was that ultimately there'd be 200 children in that subdivision. And so if we approve this and all of a sudden, as you say, the floodgates open and houses get built and, there's 50 or 60 new kids in Anchors Bend next year, then we may very well have to take the position of, okay, we let you go this past year, but...
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to withdraw my second to the motion because it doesn't appear to me that we can come to a clear understanding for the 7 of us tonight at this meeting. It is a June meeting.
Yeah.
We can discuss this or
July.
get more information before July.
But I think we have a solution.
apologize.
I think we have a solution.
I think so too.
I think what Mr.
I would accept what
Higgins-
Mr. Higgins said as a friendly amendment to my amendments to this written resolution.
I can't hear you, Dr.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment, which is exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I was going to say, would you like to just withdraw yours, let Mr. Higgins substitute his motion?
I would accept it as a
which
substitute
would be
resolution.
a hardship type situation. Is that?
But I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Higgins, you want the students or the parents then to come individually to appeal hearings? Is that your intent?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so.
Just like anyone else.
So
it's not-
basically, they'll be going to Ogden for a year, and then when they attend these appeal hearings and cannot produce proof of a hardship as defined by.
We would approve it if they had capacity.
Right, if capacity is there, we would
Capacity's there,
approve it.
We will approve it.
Yeah, we would approve it if capacity is there. The only reason we would not approve it if capacity is greatly exceeded, then and they know that going in, it was okay.
But on an individual basis and not as a group.
Well, I think if you
Yeah,
talk about from
I mean, would you
it'd
do
be
it
on
as a?
individual
You'd have
basis,
to
yeah.
follow the
You would do
appeals
it on an
process.
individual basis?
Yes.
So,
So, I mean, if we get 50 appeals from Anchors Bend next year, that sends us a clear message that the population, I mean, I'm
It's
just
not-
saying
we're
up
not
front,
worried.
I'm willing to go this year, but I'm not willing to redistrict Anchors Bend into Ogden. I am willing to let them come and as kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Hickey has suggested, saying, okay, you can come this year, but next year, we've got to look at it. We're not guaranteeing that you're going to be able to be there next year.
That's a kind of complicated process. Can I offer a more simple, if the direction's going the way I think it is? When one of these satellite subdivisions hits 20% of their build-out, it gets redistricted to its original district.
Well, wait a minute.
So
Problem
if it's
is,
200
though,
houses, when it hits 20%?
When you say it's to its original district, you mean to, like Ogden, Anchors Bend would then go back to Castle? Okay.
That would be 40 houses in Anchors Bend. They could have 80 children going to the elementary school.
You can put the trigger where you want it. I mean, it's an easier number than trying to do an annual appeal process.
I'm agreeable with that. I understand.
Could you
Right
change-
now, it's a small number. It's kind of like buying a car and the car dealership says, well, can you come up another $100? Well, yeah, I can, but can't you come down 100? I mean, it's one of those situations where right now it's a small number, but potentially we could be talking about hundreds of kids if we don't have some kind of mechanism.
Why don't we just use the figure 10% then? That'd be 20 homes, which could be, I don't know how many.
Yeah.
Pardon? You're already there?
Yeah.
And out of those, you've got 8 kids. And if out of those 8 kids, you've got 4 children who are already registered. So you're talking 8 children total, 4 children coming.
Out of the 20 that are there now?
Out of the 20.
Well, they must have come out of the Ogden district.
It's more of a retirement, it's going to be a retirement type situation. It's going to be not a young neighborhood.
Well, then we've already hit our threshold for Anchors Bend, so we can move forward, right?
Well, maybe what Mr. Higgins suggested would be the best option.
I agree.
That's just,
Well, I would
approach
suggest
it
to
as
Mr.
a hardship.
As a hardship, but I would suggest we just allow them to go this year. Anchors Bend will still remain districted at Castle Hayne. They will have to fill out the paperwork for a hardship appeal, and Dr. Holliday's office will just take care of it. And so if
It'll be
it's,
based upon numbers.
it'll be
just like
based on
all
capacity.
everything else.
He can't, the policy won't allow him to do that, because that's a preference.
Respect their.
Well, yeah, but the board can do anything.
Yes, we can, but his office
Right,
can't.
yeah, I mean,
You'd have to appeal to the
they'll have to
board.
come to the board.
Well, they can think of some hardships between now and next year, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Higgins, will you, Dr. Hickey, would you like to withdraw your motions and let Mr. Higgins make his?
Yes.
Mr. Higgins, will you make your motion?
If I can. I move that we allow the students in the Ogden, in the Castle Haynes satellites attend that, let me get this right. I move that we allow the students in the satellites currently districted to Castle Haynes to be allowed to,
And Blair?
and, well, I'm not done, to
Oh,
Castle
okay.
Haynes. I said the satellite districts, district to attend Castle Haynes in the Ogden and Blair districts be allowed to attend Ogden or Blair, depending on which district they're in, for the 2013-2014 school year. And that for 2014-2015, that those students will be assigned back to their assigned school district for the 2014-2015, but they will be permitted to come before the board with an appeal of their school assignment.
I
I
second the motion.
second the motion.
Ms. Kavanaugh, would you like to call the question on that?
I'd like to call the question.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor, please say
Mr.
aye.
Hayes, I'm
Aye.
sorry, before you, I just want to make sure I understand the motion, because I'm probably going to be asked to interpret it at some point in time. When Mr. Higgins said in 2014, 2015, they are to go back to their assigned school, what is their assigned school?
They will be
Castle Haynes?
they will be reassigned to their original assigned school, which is Castle Haynes, and they will then have to file an appeal.
Okay.
That's the whole thing, and then the board can make a decision. Huh? Individually.
Individually.
It's just like any other hardship.
Any other hardship.
Has to be individual. Yeah. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, under,
See, that was a real Solomon decision, you see. No one's really happy, you know. We cut the baby sort of squarely in half on that one.
That's a
Well, you know,
start, it's a start.
You know, Dr. Hickey, that's what they used to tell me in law school, that when you have a decision where the defendant's unhappy and the plaintiff's unhappy, it must be a pretty good decision.
Because the attorneys
hope
are
so.
happy.
okay,
Wayne doesn't look too happy.
Roman numeral 11, under new business, item A, nurses contract, Appendix K. Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good boy. You did a good job.
I respectfully ask that you approve the nurses' contract. This is a continuation of contracts that we've had in previous years.
I'll move for approval.
A second for discussion.
Okay.
Okay,
I think
questions?
Dr. Hickey raised some very good points in his emails with respect to the fact that we have what at New Hanover,
Laney and Ashley.
Laney and Ashley. Looks to be a little redundant to have school nurses where what is already there. I would ask Dr. Holliday why we need both.
Yes, sir, thank you. I'll do my best. What is a fee-for-service program that operates for accessible health care in our schools? And we appreciate you allowing us to do that, but they don't practice school nursing. They don't practice school health. Our school nurses manage our emergency medical plans. They dispense medication. They handle public health emergencies that go on in our schools. As you will recall, we've had many of those and without our nurses, we would have had a near impossible job of pulling that off. I would not recommend taking nurses, our school nurses, out of our 3 most populated high schools. Dr. Markley and I had a conversation today regarding some of the questions that were asked, and if we were to even explore that, I would ask that you give us time to do that and approve this contract tonight, because we're not certain that Watt could provide that service for us or would even be willing to do that. Today, we attempted to make some contacts just to see, just to ask some questions, just to begin some exploration, and we're not able to talk to any decision makers. They've provided really good service for us over the past several years, and being a principal in a school and having a nurse that was my school nurse made a big difference, especially in dealing with issues that we've had to deal with over the past, and you all are well aware of those issues. I certainly understand your question. However, before we would make such a decision and go in such a direction, since we were making our plans to do this, we really don't have had any plans to even explore with what they would be willing to provide, and if they would be willing to provide, and how much they would charge us. Because right now they're operating our clinics in our schools at no charge, but it's a fee-for-service program. So I would
Dr. Holliday, I keep hearing fee-for-service program, and I know that our superintendent is on their board of directors, but when you just take a cursory glance at their website, they talk about seeing everyone regardless of their ability to pay. Okay, so their mission statement is a mission statement based on seeing every person who needs health care despite their ability to pay. I don't disagree that we maybe should look into this more. I think I would feel most comfortable with approving this contract with the exception of those 3 positions, and then asking, you know, the nurses and Watt to come before the board at some point and discuss what it is that cannot be provided by the Watt Clinic. Now again, the nurses get paid approximately $63,000 per year each when you break down the numbers of what we pay for nurses in the schools. And I understand they provide very valuable functions. The question is, again, to use the terms Cadillac versus something else, you know, we have a clinic based in the schools that provide health care. In addition to that, $63,000 times 3 is roughly $190,000 that we could use for instruction. So I guess I would make the motion, the alternative motion, because Dr. Holliday says we need to approve this contract, with the exception of those 3 positions, and then allow Dr. Holliday's office to explore and report back.
Do we also
need a second on that?
do we also provide nursing supervisors? Do we also pay for those positions where it says nursing supervision?
I think
pay
you need
for
a
what's in
second
the
to the
contract.
motion.
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
second the motion.
Everything's in the contract is what we pay for.
I'm sorry, supervisors?
That's an amended motion, and we already had a motion.
This would be an amendment.
So he said, I can't
Okay.
understand.
Okay, so with this contract, we're solely paying for the nurses?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Minus
Okay.
the 3 high school, where there's a Watt Center. And then let them come back to us next meeting. Or do we just, again, table it? and
I'd
find
table
out
this
thing?
one to let them do more.
You want to amend the motion again? Or just, what's being discussed is that there are 2 motions on the floor. One is to approve the contract as is. The other would be to approve the contract minus the 3 schools where there's a Watt Center, so to exclude those nurses. And then there's discussion to just table this till the next meeting. But what would that do, Dr. Holliday, as far as time frame, as far as the nurses? Is this time sensitive to?
Could we handle it at the retreat?
Or at the work
With
session?
the work session, we'll have a work session before
Work
then.
session, yeah.
That work session is going to be taken up pretty extensively with the URS presentation.
Yeah,
When
the
does this
security.
have to be signed by?
Well, we always sign them in the July meeting.
Well,
And
I know what we always do, but.
Yeah,
when
I don't have the answer. I don't know what pushing it back a month is going to do. School starts next month, and I'm sure they have to have their folks in place as to what they're going to need. And year-round starts in 2 weeks, so.
Well, all we're talking about is those 3 high schools. So if we did what I think Dr. Hickey suggested, approve this contract except for the 3 high schools, could you find out and come back to us in August with respect to the high schools, those 3 high schools?
I can do whatever you guys tell me to do.
I appreciate that.
But my concern would be, again, we've been talking about school nurses for a long time, and this just, I understand the question, but if we were to explore this, I would respectfully ask for the time to do that, and let's make sure that we're covered in our schools. That would just be my request.
And a question to Wayne, what's a nonprofit as opposed to a governmental agency? Are there legal issues with those folks handling student records? I mean, in a drop-in situation, the student chooses to go there, but if I have a student who's on a medical plan that requires us to provide some kind of coverage or supervision of that plan, does the nonprofit, are there issues with them supervising as opposed to Department of Health?
No, as long as you cover the things in the contract, such as who's responsible for the liability and that they will maintain confidentiality of the student records. I think as long as and I think those provisions are in our what contracts. So those are valid concerns, but I think they are addressed with the provisions of the contract.
Dr. Holliday, would I be correct in saying that in looking at your email previously when some questions were asked about the nurses, I kind of got the impression that the high schools where the Watts centers are located really go above and beyond and outside what the general school nurse is doing, and that if all you had was the Watts Center there, that they really couldn't cover. It's kind of like covering 2 different things. Is that?
It is very definitely 2 different things, and if we were to use what for school nursing services, we would have to forge a different relationship with what.
But I guess that begs the question, does every high school in the United States of America have a school nurse? And if not, my gosh, what are they doing? And so we have a health clinic. I mean, you know, you go to a school nurse, and again, they do lots of things, but what they don't do is they don't treat you for strep throat with a course of antibiotics, which the Watt Clinic does. They don't provide ongoing, you know, medical care, which the Watt Clinic does. So in some respects, the Watt Clinic is superior to the services provided by a school nurse. Now, there may be things that they don't currently provide. The question is, can they provide those services? And if so, I mean, currently they don't charge us anything for their services, and in return, we provide them with overhead, with a free place to practice. We provide them with the school
Access to a
sites.
client base.
Exactly. And so I think it's something worth exploring when it's close to, you know, $190,000.
It's not, $63,000 is not all salary, it's retirement and but I just wonder if what could furnish a nurse cheaper.
Well, I don't think there's any problem, Dr. Hickey, with us wanting to save money, and maybe it's a good point in that if it were not possible now, it's kind of like 2 different things, but maybe the Watt Center could add a little something that it would be less expensive that we could be involved in. Would that be possible?
I mean, I serve on their board. I would be very surprised if they would pick up this additional non-fee reimbursement service without expecting some kind of reimbursement.
Right, yeah, but I think.
But hang on, why would it be necessarily a non-fee? Like, you have health insurance and you have to see a medical provider. So you
But
use
if
your
a
health
child comes
insurance.
to us with a medical condition, as a school, we're obligated to provide we have to monitor that health condition in the school. We don't get reimbursed for that monitoring of that service.
So we are required by the state to have a nurse at the school?
No, but there are some, for example, IEPs. There are students that have certain requirements in IEP that we have to meet that are medical requirements as opposed.
So what do we do if we don't have a school nurse?
We have to put a person in that school to be able to monitor that plan.
What is it that a nurse
What
can do that
wanted
what
access
can't
to
do?
our children, and we gave them access to our children. And they have had access to our children without any interruption for all these years. And you would think there'd be a quid pro quo as far as you can assist us. We have needs in the school system. You are a medical organization. We've given you the opportunity to serve our children. Now we're asking you to truly serve our children.
We can have a discussion with them. But like I said, if you have a kid who comes in and takes a medication every day, that's something our school nurse administers and handles those kinds of issues.
But you know something? 20 years ago, when I worked part-time as a volunteer, as a secretary in an elementary school, I provided the medication to the students on a daily basis. It wasn't a nurse.
I'm sure with privacy rules now, that's probably changed.
You're saying that nurses now are giving out prescription medicines?
They're monitoring that in the school. Dr. Holly, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm having a real hard time hearing y'all.
If a child has prescription medicine, the nurse works with the school to dispense that medicine.
Correct.
Correct.
Well, I mean, we're talking about high school kids. I mean, if they've got a prescription, it's not like it's on.
They're not allowed to take it at school, Ed. Per policy, it
So
has
what,
to
they
be
have-
dispensed by someone at the school. They're not allowed to have prescription medication
So they go.
At the high school level?
at the high school level.
So they go into the white office, they
inhaler?
take it, and they
You
leave.
can't have an inhaler?
You can have a
I
rescue
agree.
inhaler,
Thank you.
but that's an exception.
But that's prescription medication.
It's a specific exception to the general.
Well, yeah, diabetics can take it.
Because in a sense, that is a policy, so that you're kind of requiring a medical person or someone there. In
But
the
I mean,
past,
if
it's
you've
been the
already
school
got what
secretary.
there, why do you need a nurse? I guess that's the question. I mean, or do you need an RN, is what they're paying for, as opposed to an LPN? If you've already got medical personnel there, which is something that the elementary schools don't have, which the middle schools don't have, which Hoggard doesn't have, but Hanover, Laney, and Ashley do have medical personnel, or at least somebody who has access to medical personnel, the Watt Center, there. Why can't they use something a little more economical than an RN that's costing, with benefits, $63,000
That's why I asked earlier, in that, could they add to their staff in some way? I don't know medically how.
LPN or something,
Yeah, an LPN or something like that, which would be less money that we could pick up if necessary, but it would still save, as Dr. Hickey's talking about, almost $190,000. It would be below that.
Well, I guess the question becomes, at this point in time, do we approve this one and say to Dr. Holliday, next year when this rolls around, please bring us a better deal?
Or we could, because Dr. Hickey has made the motion, to approve all the nursing contracts except for the three, if I understood correctly, Dr. Hickey, the three high schools.
We'd have to decrease the amount of the contract by a commensurate amount of money, and, I don't know what that would be. Leave it to the expertise of Mr. Bullard to work that out, because he enjoys doing math.
And then come back with another proposal. Is that what you're suggesting, Dr. Hickey, for the three high schools?
Yes. I can live with that.
All right, so we need to, I guess, amend the motion to what Dr. Hickey, does everybody understand what, okay, so this time we'll vote to amend the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, so the new motion then is that we will approve the nursing contracts except for the three high schools where the Watt Centers are currently located, and we will wait until Dr. Holliday gets back with the board to see what can be worked out, possibly for a savings on personnel, additional personnel at those three schools.
Mr. Hayes, if I may just remind the board, there is an addendum to the contract that is shown on the agenda. I just want to make the board aware that there are some additional provisions that I recommended to be added regarding the Lunsford Act and indemnity and things like that.
Well, those would apply to.
They would apply either way.
You talking about in the addendum?
Yeah, the Lunsford Act, and,
Yeah, we haven't voted.
Okay, so now the motion on the floor is to, the contract, which would approve nurses in all schools except for the 3. Any other comments or questions on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it is passed. Item B, 2013-2014 Budget Resolution, Appendix L, Mary Hazel Small.
It's probably a good time to take a break before we.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we were told earlier that they're about out of tape. Let's take a 5-minute break, let them replace the tape.
Thank you.